Welcome back to the Fraser Rice Podcast. We're happy to have New York City psychotherapist Will Meyerhofer with us. Since 2005, he's been operating his private practice, known as a quiet room, offering individuals, couples, and group psychotherapy in Lower Manhattan. He has a broad practice, but has become known for counseling lawyers and business people in New York City. He has written 4 books, including the bestseller, Way Worse Than Being a Dentist, The Lawyer's Quest for Meaning. Additionally, he writes regularly for AboveTheLaw.com and on his blog, The People's Therapist. Welcome aboard, Will.
Great to be here.
So, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you go from working at a white shoe law firm in New York City to becoming a psychotherapist?
Well, basically every week I get an email that says, "Hi, Will, I'd love to work with you, but I'm located in Toledo, Ohio, Tallahassee, Florida, or name your place, Louisville, Kentucky. Is there a lawyer a therapist lawyer like you in my hometown that I can come and see?" And what I want to sort of stress to people is I'm a bit of a rare breed. No, there aren't a whole lot of people who became psychotherapists after practicing securities law at Sullivan and Cromwell. I guess I look at it as, I was really just a therapist who pretended he was a lawyer for a while.
Right.
But, really did it. I took it pretty seriously. I get a lot of credibility for having really done it. I was in the trenches. I was at a big #1 white shoe law firm doing, giant deals with Goldman Sachs and AIG and companies like that. So, the obvious question then is, well, how the hell did I ever, go from that to being a psychotherapist? The simple answer is my mom made me go to law school. Which, sounds embarrassing and silly until I listened to a whole lot of other lawyers say, "Oh yeah, my mom made me go too." And I was smart enough, I guess, that I, sort of achieved. And I guess I had convinced myself that meant I really could do this. And then I got to a law firm and realized, well, this really isn't me at all. I could do well in school and everything and get in. But, once you get there, it's really, it's who you are and whether you really are that person. Are you a securities lawyer? And the answer was no, not at all. And so at some point, Sullivan gave me, I got a bad review, and they sort of said in a very gentle Sullivan kind of way, "You really ought to think about being somewhere else in about 6 months."
Right.
Which, they did in those days. Now I think they give you 3 months, But, I did. I took all 6 months. I looked like crazy. I guess they figured I'd be gone in about 2 weeks. I would just kind of pack up my things and quietly, slink out the door and go to another law firm, which was the expectation, some sort of second tier firm or something.
In my world, I practiced law briefly coming out of law school, and it became very obvious. In fact, I knew it in law school that the billable hour and I were not going to be very good friends. And you're around so many intense people, and it sounds like they go into law for the same reasons that maybe you and I did. It seemed like a good idea at the time, or you got outside pressures in order to do it. Are there any other universal truths to the people that you work with on that front?
Oh, you mean people going into law for wrong reasons, or just people going
Sure.
to law, period? The thing is, it was a really intense job, and it's being done by people who take it very, very seriously. I was at the very highest echelons of, Wall Street law firms, and those guys are really, really good. And, it's not, law is spun as a bit of an intellectual endeavor. The notion is you get this degree and you get good grades, and they're all intellectuals, and it's all very scholarly. But, it kind of isn't really. I guess it is if you're like a law professor. And I guess there was a time when someone like me would have wound up, teaching.
Right.
But those jobs don't really exist anymore. So,
Well, many times, at least in the corporate law background, you're the plumber in the deal. You're papering the deal. You're maybe part of the structuring of it. And there isn't a lot of new ground to break. And at the end of the day, you've got a very specific set of things you have to do to get the deal across the finish line.
Yeah, I'll tell you, at a place like Sullivan, you don't call them in. All right, there's some routine work that we just get because we have the relationships, and
Sure.
It's, like a shelf takedown or whatever, But a lot of the stuff we handled was, it was a mess. It was really complicated. No one had ever done it before. It wasn't clear how the heck to structure it. And the reason they gave it to us is that it would have overwhelmed probably any other law firm, So, every deal was a fresh hell, It was always some incredible, I always would think, well, that was a nightmare, but, we closed it and now I'll get on some nice, easy puffball of a deal that'll, no, it wasn't like that. The next one was more horrible than that one,
So if it's new and novel, theoretically, that should scratch the intellectual itch. When your clients come to you, what are they struggling with?
Okay, well, look, there are two things you want in a therapist, right? That they're give a damn and that they're smart enough to understand what you're talking about. If they're not smart, you end up with this really caring, loving, soft, gentle person who doesn't understand a thing you're saying. And if they don't give a damn, you end up with this intellectual who's staring at the clock. So what I try to be is someone who actually does give a damn, and somebody who also knows what they're talking about. And having that background really helps. So people show up in my office a lot of the time because they are, working on Wall Street, or they're, in the legal world or the financial world.
So the clients, they're struggling with something internally related to purpose, or the type of work that they're doing, or where they fit in things.
Well, I mean, there are a couple ways of looking at it. One is they're probably suffering from either anxiety or depression, because those are sort of the two big things. Anxiety is essentially you're scaring yourself to death to try to not be surprised and scared to death. You're trying to be so hypervigilant that nothing jumps out and goes boo, and you go, And depression is essentially you feel like you're failing, and you feel like, you have no one to blame but yourself. So you start beating yourself up and really getting down on yourself. But another way of looking at it is, I guess Freud had this idea that there are these three pillars of life, these three living tasks, and it's playing and working and loving. And so you could look at it that way. I mean, people come to me with, playing, which would be, social anxiety, feeling isolated, feeling alone, don't have friends, don't have a network of friends. Loving, which would be romantic issues, can't find a partner, or working, just issues with career, And of course, I get a lot of issues with career. In fact, I get a lot of lawyers who say to me, look, my job is fine. I'm actually here for something else. I had one of those today, It's like, I know you deal with a lot of people with law and unhappiness around law, but I'm actually okay with the job. I'm in the middle of a divorce. That's what I want to talk about,
You deal with a lot of people who've been working really hard. They've probably built up a lot of defenses in order to get from A to Z so that they could personally get through things, and probably aren't used to showing a lot of vulnerability. How do you get them to open up? Do you have a process around that? Or is that something that just is a natural consequence of your question and answer and information transfer that people naturally come out of their shells?
You give them enough time. It's funny, the ones who are really like that, the ones who really won't open up, by the time they call me, they're usually at wit's end. It's funny, I get some where if I can't get back to them in time, they'll cancel or something, and then maybe they'll call me again in 3 months or something like that, because I'll be on vacation or something, and I'll, say, hey, sorry, I'm on vacation. I'll schedule it, 2 weeks out when I get back, and then they'll cancel or not show or something like that. And then I had one person 3 times in a row cancel, and then finally said, listen, I'm really sorry, but it kept getting really bad, and I kept calling you, and then the next day it wouldn't be as bad, so I'd cancel. I try to stress to them, it doesn't have to be that bad to call me. It's really okay to just, make an appointment and come in and talk. But I guess the ones who are the most resistant are often the ones who wait to the last minute. Sometimes, they do put in on that exterior. I had one client that we used to laugh about her first appointment. She came in and I was intimidated. I mean, she was in her little suit with her briefcase, and she was just one of those attorneys that looks like she can just, spit nails at you, and I was like, well, okay, within 2 or 3 appointments, she would just come in and grab a box of tissues and have a good cry. And, she was miserable, it's just, she had that defense on. And what's funny too, I think it helps. I mean, I used to do that. I knew exactly what she was doing. I used to put on that persona. I used to be this lawyer from Sullivan and Cromwell in my suit who was very, very serious and rather aggressive. I even pull it on sometimes when, I get clients that are playing head games with me around scheduling or something, and I'll say, listen, I'm an attorney too. Don't mess around here. Like I worked on Wall Street.
It's like it's like having Joe Kennedy run the SEC. That's the perfect guy for it.
There's this idea that therapists are like, the village vicar or something. I feel like I should be wearing like a pastel cardigan and be, very, very nice, and sort of floppy brown leather shoes and corduroy trousers, and just kind of, but I'm not, the fact is I was an S&C securities lawyer, and I did M&A work, and, I can connect with you because I was there too. I get real, it's, people have very odd ideas about therapy, it's and what they're expecting. And I think I confront some of those, like I turn them on their head a little bit.
So when you're dealing with people who are successful or working hard and doing well, but either numerically or whether it's making partner, they don't feel like they measure up, or maybe their chosen field, they aren't making enough to measure up compared to their neighbors and so on. That would seem to be, especially in New York City, grist for the mill for just about anybody who's working in New York. There's always a bigger, better deal going on out there. What do you start to talk about to people about those types of issues?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I've been working with some high net worth individuals, and it's kind of funny because I keep thinking, well, that's the richest guy I ever worked with, and then I get a richer guy, and it's how it is with money. It's kind of you just keep tacking on zeros, and you think, God, how rich can these people get, And I had a guy the other day who said, I've got $100 million. So why have I not had sex with my wife in a year? And why do I hardly know my kids? And, why do I hate my job and dread going in every morning? And, I guess you have to sort of understand what money is. Money is this reward scheme that we have to incent people so they'll go chasing, after something. And, it's one incentive, and it provides convenience. Money's great in the sense that, it gets rid of a lot of worries, and you get carried around on sort of a cloud of other people doing all those little things that you need in life and stuff. But let's face it, you still get sick, you still die, you still have to have romantic relationships that are meaningful, and money can't buy you any of that. It can't buy you meaningful relation with your kids. It can't buy you friends. And in fact, it could sort of counter that, good friendships by presenting barriers of anything.
Well, it's scary too, because I think when you have any numerical measure that people start to sort of hang their self-esteem on, that becomes really dangerous. And especially when you talk about someone who has $100 million, and what's the difference between 150 and 25 and ultimately 2 down, you don't have that much more self-esteem. And when the other trappings of I put in quotes, success aren't there for you, that seems to me to be something that could send you down a dark path.
Yeah, look, if you're making that kind of money, you probably have, made making money really important. And so there's, there's actually this kind of fallacy. It's a kind of one of these psychology test things where they say that the expectation of happiness around a possession is kind of distorted. Like there's this notion that if I buy that Mercedes-Benz, I'm going to be incredibly happy. And then when they do the sort of testing of how happy are you, a month later when you have the Mercedes, it's like, that's all right. It's not the end of the world. But beforehand, you're like, oh my God, when I get that Mercedes, I'm going to just be walking on air. It's going to be so great. That's why it's an incentive rather than sort of a substantive thing, money, It was odd to have somebody with so much money, so much unimaginable amount of money, say, why hasn't this done more for me? And I guess I wanted to get back to Freud's basics of, working and loving and playing, that it doesn't do that for you. It's nice. Everybody likes having money, but there's a lot more that we still need to work on. You need to figure out what happened with you and your wife, how you lost your way. You don't seem to know each other. Now, it could be that I can get you talking again and it'll start to happen and you'll think, oh, I love her. I respect her. I'm attracted to her. I want to be with her. Or it might be that you have grown apart and it is time to say, why am I in this? But it so often it seems like cemented in place. And I guess the money only sort of exacerbates that too, that, once you're that wealthy, you have your mansion and you have your, your circle of people around you and everything, you can get kind of frozen into expectations of others, like I've heard a lot of very wealthy clients say to me, oh, my children would be destroyed if our marriage were to break up, or, we couldn't leave Scarsdale or whatever, even though I really want to live down in Soho because they're in school and it would be horrible. Or even, this one kind of surprised me, but I think it's eye-opening is, I couldn't close down my investment fund because all the people who work there are counting on it. And without me, we'd have to close it down or something, and there's this sort of sense of I built this business or, this huge law firm that I created or something where I'm, 50% of the billables, and all the clients expect me to meet with them. And if I leave, what's going to happen? So it becomes almost a trap, the success.
I was going to say a gilded cage. You've created this foundation of responsibility that all of a sudden very difficult to extricate yourself. And if you attach guilt to that, even more difficult.
I had a managing partner of a law firm who wanted to paint. Finally, what we ended up doing was getting us a sort of weekend place with a big light-filled room and an easel and some paints. And I kind of encouraged him to take his hours down and phase down his responsibilities a little bit and make some space for that part of him, And I don't know, he may have been a terrible painter and a great managing partner, but he needed to express that part of who he was. It's funny too how many incredibly successful people in the sort of world of money and everything have other interests, other impractical things they want to do.
This podcast is exhibit A for me. It's something that I really needed to do. Whether or not it has any bearing on my day job, it really doesn't. But it it's important for me. And it's one of those situations where if I didn't do it and pursue it and push it forward, that I did not want to be left wondering and to have this interest unattended to, or else that would have created a real emotional issue. And it seems so minor, but it isn't. And I think it does help me in my other ways of life, and especially my day job and advising people. I'm glad I do it, and it's an important thing.
I think, thank goodness for philanthropy. I mean, it sounds crazy, but philanthropy, I mean, you think, well, you donate the money and you get a plaque on the wall and that's why they do it or whatever. But it's usually more than that. It's usually like you really, you always wanted to be a doctor, but you instead opened a hedge fund. And so you donate a wing of a hospital and kind of get involved, or, I mean, I'm in my own small way on the board of a little jazz venue that helps, get young musicians their first gigs and, mentors and things like that, the Jazz Gallery. And, I got on the board and for me, it's like, I guess I always wanted to be a jazz musician, but this is where I get to hang out with them, and they need me and I need them,
Perhaps talent and achievement work at an intersect for you, but you found another way to help push that agenda along.
Well, we're all born with these talents, these aptitudes, and we don't really choose them. I mean, if we were sort of allowed to say, okay, well, I'd like to be the rock singer, or I'd like to be the killer banjo player, but instead you're just born with these aptitudes, and it has all these endless ramifications. I mean, we reward with money, some of them just so heavily, and others we sort of ignore. But they're really just, we need them all. If everyone on the planet were, I just snapped my fingers and they were all Einstein, it would be the collapse of our society. I mean, it would be a catastrophe because we don't need all Einsteins. What we need is some people who design computers and other people who can, fix your plumbing and other people who, play saxophone. And, we need everyone. And it's sort of odd. It's sort of random who we're born, what aptitude we happen to have and what role we fall into.
So what happens to that client of yours who works hard and is talented, but they feel like they've been left behind or that they're not achieving the way they want to, and whether it's reflected numerically or within their firm or their business, that their performance doesn't match up with their expectation?
I was asked at a panel at Harvard a while back. It was a panel on happiness, and that we were all supposed to define happiness. And there was a whole bunch of there were people from the clergy, psychologists, And my definition of happiness was living your life as an authentic expression of the authentic self. There's a lot of authentic in there, and there should be, because it's really about authenticity. And if you're not really succeeding, it's probably because you're in the wrong role. It just really is. I mean, that's a heavy message, because I had a lady at Sullivan and Cromwell when I was there who kept saying, maybe you're just not cut out for this, Will. And I thought, you evil witch, how dare you say that to me? I need to do well here, damn it. Please say something nice to me. But of course, she was dead on. She had pegged it. It wasn't an authentic expression of who I was. I didn't care about, what a securities regulation or whatever. I mean, securities regulation is like this complicated board game that I could learn the rules to, but I wasn't interested enough to bother. When you have a friend who's a game geek and you're just like, I don't want to learn this. I'm just going to have a drink. That was kind of how I felt doing securities regulation. And, so, when someone comes to me and they say, well, I'm not succeeding, I'm not getting, the success I want, I usually think, all right, you're probably in the wrong role. It's like, there used to be guilds in the Middle Ages, and you're probably in like the barrel maker guild and you want to be in the shoemaker guild or something. You're probably just doing the wrong thing. I mean, one of the classic things that therapists get, and I've got this a few times, is you get the PhD student who says, I need someone to help me finish my dissertation.
You're in deep trouble at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is there's a part of you that doesn't want to do this. And at very least, okay, rather than, and I can send you to a life coach or whatever. And a life coach will probably, beat you with a whip and make you do 5 words a day or, just force you to do it. But I mean, rather, what I think of it as is there's a little kid in you. This is kind of Freudian, but there's this little 7-year-old or whatever. And he doesn't want to do it. And you really can't ignore this kid because at some level he's got the controls, So we have to sit him down at the table and just say, okay, why don't you want to do this? And probably the message is very fundamental and elementary and just core. It's just because this isn't who I am. I'm not, I'm not interested in this. Doesn't sing to me.
So what do you do with the clients who are successful and maybe they've come to some level of balance in their life, but they feel like they're an imposter in their world? And what I mean by that is they don't give themselves enough credit for the success they had, given where they are. Or do you find that most people who are high achievers, that the ego in them takes credit for things, and whether or not they're there by some piece of luck or fortunate circumstance, they're able to ignore that?
Well, if they're doing really well, they probably know they're really good. Usually what the issue is we tend to sort of discount things that are easy for us, you know? So, I mean, like I have a lot of lawyers who are like, look, I'm great at it. I mean, they use me all the time. Everybody wants to work with me. I keep getting promoted. How are your reviews? Oh, they tell me I'm fantastic. They keep giving me bonuses. I mean, look, I wasn't like that. I was a terrible associate. And, my reviews were like fine until they got rid of me and they were terrible, So, I mean, I don't think they even realize that that's unusual. I had a lawyer in the other day and, got glowing reviews and basically told, you are a partner track kid. Head of the department wrote, best associate I think I've ever worked with. And he was like, well, that's good, but I wonder what I'm going to do. And am I happy? And, and I thought, well, look, let's just stop there and just pat you on the back. Right. I mean, hey, you go. Right. I mean, that's really rare. That's you're good at this. And he's like, well, it isn't very hard. I mean, what's it to it? And I'm like, well, I mean, right. But that's the thing. I mean, Jascha Heifetz picks up the violin. He's like, it's just a fiddle. I'm good at it. I mean, it's you start to realize that we really are born with talents and you can take them for granted sometimes, I think.
What happens to the high-end associate who is really good at what they do, but they lack the other skills that may make them a good partner? Whether it's the rainmaking skills, the relationship management skills, the management of other lawyer skills, but they're spectacular technicians, let's say. What do you do for that person?
That's a big one. I had a lawyer who thanked me the other day because I said to him, look, let's just reframe this, okay? I keep hearing you tell me I hate marketing. I don't want to have to do that. I'm a lawyer. Why should I have to take people out to lunch and schmooze them? And I said, let me just reframe this as that's the hardest part of this job. That, it's not just that you hate it because it's so stupid or silly or pointless or whatever. It's that it's actually hard, that it's very tough to confront your resistance, really, frankly, social phobia to sitting with a stranger and trying to persuade him to give you a job. I mean, it may not be, sound as hard as analyzing, 15 securities cases and trying to, write a brief or something. But it's in many ways, it's harder, and it may be harder for that person. So I try to point out, have some respect for that aspect of the job. Don't dismiss it. I think taking someone out to lunch and having it go well is every bit as challenging as framing a brief, or coming up with a strategy for a case, or outlining a complicated merger deal or something.
Well, sometimes the simple aspect of the job is actually doing the work. It is that relationship management that's crazy. And from my perspective, an example would be, when I'm out talking to clients or referring advisors on a golf course. Well, I love to play golf. I'm okay at it, and I don't mind being in front of people. But that is a very difficult thing for me because I have multiple agendas at that point. I'm trying to sort of keep it business oriented. I'm trying to make sure people have a good time so that they remember why they're there with me. And then otherwise, I'm just trying to drive the discussion forward. All in the meantime, making sure I don't kill someone off in their house by shanking a drive or something like that. And that's a lot of balls to keep in the air. It's a challenge, and sometimes it's not fun.
I know. I mean, the funny thing is that my job is that entirely, I sit down and relate to people for an hour at a time all day long, and so, that was the stuff I was good at. I mean, the crazy thing is after I left law, I actually went into business world for a while. I was a marketing executive at a .com. And I was pretty good actually at closing deals. I think what I realized, and some people, other therapists I think have had this revelation, is that, I could have been a really good salesman, but instead I decided to, use my magical powers for good instead of evil. I could be selling things to people, but instead I decided to, try to help them with therapy. But it's, salesmen have an element of sort of a psychotherapy thing going, you have to connect with people at an authentic level. What we call sustaining an authentic contact, holding the contact with the person, the real connection.
Well, in my line of work, ultimately, I have to get people to trust that I can deliver on what we say we can deliver. And if you can't convey that in a short amount of communication, you're going to end up in trouble because there just aren't enough hours in the day and enough people out there in order to make the business end of it make sense. So what you're saying resonates with me.
And it's about, the funny thing is people have an idea that sales is always sleazy and fake. But in fact, good sales is incredibly authentic. There's something about sort of exposing yourself in a really honest way that is the most effective way to sell. That's why you should believe in what you're selling, and your word should be good, and that kind of thing.
Well, ultimately, if you're solving problems and you're giving good advice,
Yeah.
in a sense, a sale is a consequence of that, as opposed to the reverse, where the product is kind of the driving force. Then it feels better for the person who's actually for both people on both sides of the table. You feel good that you're helping someone, you're elevating them past their current problem, and then the person on the other side is having their problem solved.
Yeah, I had a salesman, a really successful salesman, like CEO of a company, tell me they're not, they're buying you essentially,
Right.
and you have to make sure that it's a good product,
As we sort of move over to Wall Street and finance, we talked a little bit about believing in what you sell. How do you deal with the people who are good at what they do and successful either selling or advising, but they get wrapped up in the paradoxes that litter Wall Street in terms of conflicts of interest, all sorts of things where many times a product is helping the company out as much or more than it's helping the client out. How do you get people to reconcile those differences and move forward? And if they don't, where does that show up when they come to you?
Yeah, I've had that problem mostly in regard to hedge funds. There's a real feeling here that, one of my clients said to me, this isn't an investment strategy, it's a compensation strategy, which is, I guess, an old line now, but they're a lot of these guys in the investment world have sold a bill of goods, which is, I'm going to beat the S&P and you're going to pay me a high fee and everything. And I have watched some of these guys really go through rough years where the fund hasn't delivered, or you can see on the look on their face, which is, oh God, it's been a terrible year. I've got people pulling money, that kind of thing. There's a sort of fatalism to it. There's, I've read The Black Swan and all that. It's a lot of it is luck, and what you're doing is you're very heavily leveraged on things that ought to work, and you keep doing it until it doesn't work, and then, you retire. One guy said to me, you retire at 40 in this business. If you're lucky, you retire with a pile of money at 40. You pull out as much cash as you can and you put it away in something safe, like, real estate or something, theoretically safe. But it takes a toll. It really does. I don't think you can do it unless you're convinced that there's at least a chance that you can pull it off. I've had some where I could see a quiver of doubt in their eyes, maybe.
Yikes. You never want that.
It is. I wonder with that business, a lot of the guys I do, like something like iBanking. The world needs iBankers. It's a very tricky thing to be a good iBanker. It's amazing. It's this odd combination of skills. You have to be incredibly smart and an amazing salesman, kind of at the same time. It's like a weird package.
When you have to be a really good connector. To me, it seems like a really good investment banker, at some level, it goes without saying, you have to be numerically smart and understand the companies. You have to have a good set of contacts, but you have to have your antennae spread very wide to be able to see why this combination or this divestiture works, and then be able to execute it.
Yeah, it's a tricky. There's a reason they get paid so much, I think, is that it's really hard to pull off. It's a tough business, but at least there isn't the sense. I don't know. I guess there's always a little bit of fakery at the heart of Wall Street.
Puffery is a part of every one of those things, because if you were just left with the prospectus, I think most people would look at it. It's just gobbledygook and numbers, and you're saying, "Well, wait a minute, what? There's got to be a story to it." And one of my colleagues said, "You know what? In the wealth management world, we're in the entertainment business, or more specifically, a show business, because you have to be able to tell the story behind what you're doing, or else it's not going to resonate with the person across the table from you."
Yeah, it's kind of. I had one guy who was doing sort of. I think they literally call it a dog and pony show, where you're selling a hedge fund to a bunch of investors, and he was going around the country. Well, he was pitching, what they were selling. He was pitching the investments, and but it sounded tough. It sounded like you had to make the case, and you're meeting with these vastly wealthy people who would, if they liked you, they'd put a little in, I guess, and see how it did. But I had one guy, I guess he was a lawyer, and his buddy ran a hedge fund, and he had the story where the guy would call him at 4 a.m. and just say, "Oh, dude, I'm so wired up. I just need you to talk me down.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And I thought, wow, I guess this is a tough job, you know.
To get back to law for a second, the practice of law is very different from what's portrayed in the media. You and I have both been in it in, the days of LA Law and Suits and all these other shows that sort of show the snippets that are glamorous or at the very least interesting in 1 or 2 minute intervals. In reality, if you're almost any kind of lawyer at this point, the hours are just brutal.
Yeah, the hours have made the whole profession kind of non-viable. I mean, the crazy thing about law is that, all right, one problem is that the schools blew up to the size where the class sizes are literally like 400 students in a class at some of these schools, 500, I think, at Georgetown and maybe even at Harvard. And so there are just too many lawyers, I mean, it became a very profitable thing for the schools because you could charge an unbelievably high tuition for something that really is very inexpensive. I mean, you have a teacher sit and give a lecture to 100 kids, and you're charging the equivalent of something, honest to God, like $200 an hour for each kid for that lecture. I mean, when you think about how absurd that is, and you could pretty much play a tape to them of the same lecture because it's identical to the one he gave the year before. It's a contract lecture. I guess what I'm saying is there's no laboratories, there's no equipment, there's no, law is inexpensive to teach.
You don't really need a computer.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to it really, but they can charge. So the point being that, at NYU, when I was there, the dean of the law school, no surprise, became the dean of NYU. Because the law school was generating so much cash that it was basically paying for the entire university. I mean, the law school was the cash cow, which is weird, but that was the truth. I mean, all those buildings that are getting built and everything, it was all coming from money from the law school. So, you had this problem where you had too many people going into law, and a lot of them obviously weren't really cut out for it, people like me, and we sort of realized it and went off and became hairdressers or, banjo players or whatever else we really wanted to do. But then you've got this other problem that even the people who really love it, who really... their heart really sings. I mean, there are people who love being accountants. There are people who love being lawyers. It's a sort of a nerdy thing maybe, but, I have stumbled on just born lawyers. And they come to me and say, the hours are crushing. I mean, it's just as simple as that to make the kind of money that they expect us to make. You're a lawyer when you talk in terms of billable hours and you just spit these numbers out and everybody's like, oh yeah, well, that's all, gee whiz, wow. But I think ordinary civilians don't know what, 2950 means. That means 2,950 billable hours in 1 year. I think that comes out to what, roughly 60 hours of working each week?
I was going to say it's at least 2/3 of your waking hours.
Yeah, are billable. That's not the unbillable ones that you're just at the office putzing around or, going to, get lunch or something. I mean, that's a staggering amount of time. That means essentially every weekend you're working. Lawyers say things to me that are just, it takes a while to register. Like, I took the weekend off, and you think, hey, hang on, it's a weekend. You don't have to take it off, man. I mean, right? Or, they left me alone mostly on my vacation. I worked a couple hours every day, but I mean, it was pretty good, and you think, you were skiing in Utah. I mean, what the, for 1 week, you haven't had a vacation all year and they had you working every day of it, But to them, that seems like, wow, whatever, I only worked a couple hours a day. That was amazing, it just distorts everything, to a point where it damages the relationships. I had a guy very recently I was just talking to who, how was he supposed to court this woman that he's sort of hoping down the line to maybe propose to for marriage, when he keeps having to cancel dates, like dinner dates and things, stuck in the office, sorry, honey, that kind of thing. It takes a real toll. Of course, your friends too. I mean, they've given up on you by then, but
right. No, I mean it's a brutal thing though. I mean, if you aren't available beyond your job, then you're really locked in, and maybe that helps perpetuate the cycle, and then your relationships become wholly office related, and then if you really don't buy into what you're doing, then you're in a bad spiral.
Well, they end up having affairs at the office. That's a whole syndrome. I mean, that's like a whole trope in the big law world is the office affairs, which could just be flirting with that guy, down the hall, or it could be, a whole full-blown affair or something. I mean, I see a lot of that. A lot of times it fizzles out because, they have this phrase, you've heard the phrase beer goggles,
Mm-hmm.
They call them law goggles, which is, when, it's 2:00 in the morning and you're working on a closing and that tax lawyer suddenly doesn't look too bad, I think they call it lawyer cute, he's lawyer cute, But, it's because, you're going out of your mind and you see all kinds of side effects of it. I mean, people are, compensatory acting out is sort of this huge thing that I deal with, like I work whatever, 29.50 a year or something, whatever this crazy number of hours. I'm there days, nights, weekends, and Oh yeah, there's a firm called Jones Day, and the nickname was Jones Days, nights and weekends. But I mean, these are running jokes, but it's a serious reality, and it eats your life. You really don't have any room for anything else.
And so the compensatory behavior, that's when you have 2 hours, you just
you want instant gratification,
right? I mean,
so you either play video games, or look, it gets really awful. You snort cocaine, you get high, you drink way too much, you call up a prostitute, and I've had people in very powerful positions, general counsels at companies and stuff, and I get them into, or partners, I get them into the office, and they start telling me what they're doing when they get home from the office, and I'm like, wow, he's out of control. It's like, well, I ate a whole pizza and then, smoked 12 bong hits, and I'm like, you're putting your life into such a small box that when we let you out of that box, you just go crazy. The culture of alcohol is all over law. I mean, it's weird. I was at a gala. It was sort of linked to lawyers and depression and suicide. It's some group that they asked me to come. And the crazy thing is the event was just as alcohol-soaked as any other big law event would be, to the point where I sort of, walked out the door because I was thinking, well, I got to get home. I've got a husband at home and make him dinner and stuff. And there was a guy out there just, absolutely sloppy drunk, just, another one, puking on the sidewalk. And I thought, yeah, that's a big law party, and it's because it's compensatory acting out. They're bottled up, and when you release all that tension, they tend to go bonkers.
What happens when you have clients that have chemical issues and depression, anxiety? How do you unwind the one from the other, i.e., are there times when the chemical issue drives the other behavior, or other times where it's vice versa, where the depression is really something where people go to the chemicals to unwind?
Well, yeah, they use this term self-medicating with substances, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think there is a sort of, I'm seeking something, so I'll use this substance, to try to get it, some sort of respite or escape or relief or something. It's funny, when I work with substances, I'm a great believer in 12-step. I think AA has saved countless lives, and it's a terrific organization, and I'm all for it. I do think that if I'm working along with somebody who's in recovery, or maybe somebody who isn't, maybe their drinking hasn't quite gotten to where they feel they're alcoholic, but they want to pull back on it, I have something I call the happy Ralph theory, which is a guy, Ralph, that I worked with, who was drinking way too much. And I said, my sense here is that if we could get you happy with your life, you'd stop drinking. So we took this guy's life and just made him happy. We got him into a different apartment where he had enough space. He adopted some kids. He wanted to do that. He changed jobs to something that didn't have these long hours that he was working before. And, at a certain point, I said, well, how are we doing on the drinking? And he said, I haven't even thought about it. I mean, why would I drink? I'm so happy. So, I had an alcoholic once say this to me. She said, everyone drinks on anger. Well, I think I asked her, are you drinking on anger? Are you drinking your anger? And she said, of course, everyone drinks when you drink, anger, If you're not angry, if you're not unhappy, you're probably not going to act out in these crazy ways. And I've seen it over and over again, where I'll work with people and just let them get all that, what's making them unhappy out. I mean, psychotherapy really is about getting out of your own way, It's about kind of like, just talking to yourself and working something out, And, they talk to themselves, and at a certain point they think, why am I doing that? It's making me really unhappy. And, if I stop doing that and I'm not unhappy anymore, I don't have to go out and get blind drunk and, have terrible, god-awful stuff happen to me. So you'd be surprised. Happy people really, they just don't act out that way. They don't abuse substances.
Fewer problems to medicate.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times when somebody like a serious alcoholic, you get them sober for 90 days or, 6 months or whatever in AA. And, then they start realizing why they were drinking, It's like, okay, I'm 90 days sober and now I'm dying for a drink because, God, look at the wreckage of my life, And that's when I swing in and I say, all right, well, let's take a look at why your life is this wreck and, and what can we do about it? It's your life. I mean, gee whiz, we ought to be able to get you out of your own way and give you the life you want. And then you don't have to ever drink again, never end up in that horror of alcoholism and drug abuse.
You've carved out an interesting niche with lawyers and Wall Street types and business people, but you also deal with artists, writers, and other creative types. Is there a difference in what they go through in terms of their endeavors and the problems that they face? And I guess part of sort of a follow-up question is the currency of their self-esteem different from the other professionals that you deal with?
They're paid less. I think that's probably the biggest difference. Other than that, I think they're just born with different talents, really. I mean, I've thought this one through and, I wonder. I mean, some people play saxophone and some people are really good at, closing M&A deals. I'm not sure it's that different, except we pay one of them a whole lot of money and treat them differently. You're born with an aptitude. So, I work with a television actor who's very successful now. He's getting lots of shows and stuff. And, it's funny because when the money starts to come, they start treating you like you work on Wall Street, And you start to realize, a year ago, he was this creative person, an actor, and everyone sort of vaguely felt sorry for him, but really respected him. Now it's like, oh, he just does TV, and he's doing a movie with whatever, but, and it's, and then suddenly he's in a different realm, and you think, well, what's the difference? Well, I think it's just that they pay them less generally. It's harder to make it in those fields because I guess we don't need as much art as we need, I don't know, accounting done or something. But I don't know if it's that big a difference. I think we tend to sort of put this wall up between creative people and non-creative people. Really, when you think about it, everything's creative in some sense. Maybe that's it. We should just accept that. I think people who do very well in finance, people who make, huge money, their skill, if I were to sort of define it, would be a game skill. I had a friend who was a vastly wealthy banker, and God, he loved games and, card games and board games and strategy games, and he would just win every damn time. Just every time. I would play over and over again. I'd play with other friends and get really good, and then we'd go back and play with him, and he would always win. And, I think if you were sitting down with Warren Buffett playing poker, he would just take you, and shake you, and you'd lose every cent you had because the guy is that good. So, that is sort of a creative ability, and that's just like someone who can paint a beautiful painting or something. It's just, he's one of at the tail, I guess, of the curve. He's one of those outliers who just is incredibly good at this thing.
What a terrific conversation. For those people who may be listening and sort of hearing their situation in some of the things we talked about before and feel like they need some help, what's the best thing for them to do?
It's funny. I feel a little self-serving, say, well, you should do some therapy. On the other hand, look, I'm a therapist, right? So, I sort of think everyone should do some therapy. I also, tip my hat at like trainers and yoga instructors and people like that. I think that, mind and body go together. I had a lawyer today, actually, who was saying to me, I miss being athletic. I used to be an athlete. Like, I miss feeling good about my body. I feel like I just eat takeout food at my desk and I'm turning into a big lump. And I was like, well, go for a run, for heaven's sake. Get to the gym, But he had this problem where it was taking a toll on his marriage. He was coming back and just sort of unloading his anxiety on his wife, I think. And it was doing harm to his marriage. He was like, look, I never see you. And when I do see you, all you do is come and tell me how miserable you are at work or, how overloaded and this and that. Find someone to talk to. So, it can help to talk to somebody, it really, they tell young therapists, if you're listening, you're doing more than you think. And that's because the other person's talking to themselves, the other person's getting something out that they really, the thing about psychotherapy is it seems so flaky and everyone talks about, oh, is Freud, is it dead? Is this, that, next thing, But on the other hand, look, it seems so intuitively obvious that it helps to talk, right? Everybody at some level knows that, if you gave them a quiet room someplace, the name of my practice, not coincidentally, and someone who really seems to care and is smart enough to understand, we'd all enjoy getting something said for an hour, right? Why wouldn't that be a really helpful thing that would probably feel pretty good?
Will, thank you very much for being on. What is the best way to keep in touch with you and to follow your writing?
You can check out my blog. It's thepeoplestherapist.com. And also my private practice website is aquiet.room.com. And the blog, I'm always posting things. And I also write now and again for abovethelaw.com, which is a really fun website about law. So, and the books, I don't know, I might have another one in me. I always say, that's it, I'm never writing another book. And then out pops another book. So, I couldn't believe it, but I actually came up with a second volume of Way Worse Than Being a Dentist. And the title was just staring me in the face, and everyone agreed as soon as I said it, which was Still Way Worse Than Being a Dentist. So,
what's amazing? Sometimes titles just drive books, whether they need to be written or not. And your book I've read, which is it's great. I love it. But sometimes the title is it has its own force.
Well, my first book is called Life is a Brief Opportunity for Joy. And it is, and a lot of people come to me just unbelievably unhappy, and I don't know if they believe me, but I say this has a happy ending. Everyone has the right to get up in the morning looking forward to their day and, to do something that's fulfilling. And lawyers sometimes are so cynical. Business people too sometimes, but you can live authentically and still make a decent living. We can pull this off. This story can have a happy ending. Life is a brief opportunity for joy. It really is.
Terrific. Will, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to New York City psychotherapist Will Meyerhofer. Check back soon for our next episode. And be sure to check the full slate of podcasts on FraserRice.com. Thanks again and have a great day.